All right, switching gears back to the Biden family scandals, with Hunter's plea deal completely blowing up earlier this week. Well, what's next for the big guy? Let's bring in Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney, National Review contributing editor, and Fox News contributor. Andy, good to see you. Let's talk about this, the deal that blew up, the immunity that was written into the diversion agreement, but not the Department of Justice didn't want to put it on the record, but they did put it in writing, thinking they could slide it by the judge. What do you think of how this deal was structured?
Well, it's obviously very different, Sean, in that our adversarial criminal justice system depends on the defense lawyers looking out for the interests of the defendant. And set your timers for this, right? The Justice Department looking out for the interests of the American people, not the defendant. So what happened here is the two sides are in cahoots rather than adversarial. And you got an agreement that looks like it was basically written by Hunter's defense lawyers. The judge, to her credit, asked questions that judges don't normally have to ask because the agreement looked so different. Usually the immunity provision in a plea agreement is in the plea agreement. But here, as you say, they tucked it into the diversion agreement in connection with the gun that they weren't going to prosecute. And by the way, judges don't have to sign those diversion agreements. They only sign, they only get involved in the plea agreement. So the whole thing was to try to sort of bamboozle her, and good for her for not letting them do it.
But listen, in state court back in Wisconsin when I was a prosecutor, if you were going to offer someone immunity, you would spell out what the immunity was for.
Right.
It didn't seem like the deal delineated any of the immunity that was offered. It seemed to be blanket. Is that odd in federal court?
Well, it's not only odd, Sean. It begs the next question, which is, now that the deal blew up, as somebody asked me the other day, so do they now have to go to trial? And my answer was, go to trial on what? Right. Because just like they wouldn't describe the immunity in the plea deal, there's no indictment. They've never indicted this guy because they don't want to lay out the crimes that are involved here. If you laid out those crimes, you wouldn't be able to justify giving this guy a 2 misdemeanor count tax plea. It would be obvious the kind of stuff that the Biden family is into. And most importantly, they don't want to indict because as long as there's no indictment, the statute of limitations continues to run. So they've already lost the very important Burisma counts from 2014 and 2015. And the longer this goes, the more the case evaporates.
Yeah, no, it is baffling as a former prosecutor to see how the feds, the Department of Justice has treated this case. And so the party's going to come back to court in 30 days to give an update to the judge. When the first deal was struck, the one that just blew up, there wasn't as much attention around Hunter Biden. We didn't have the whistleblowers come out and testify on Capitol Hill about the interference that was run by the Department of Justice and the FBI, whether it was looking into the big guy or we didn't know they were giving tips off to the Hunter Biden team of search warrants to be executed. Now that we have that information, how do you think this new deal, if there is a deal, will be structured? What's going to happen 30 days from now?
It's hard to say because it looks to me like you can't really predict this on the basis of what you and I know about, which is the behavior of normal prosecutors and normal prosecutors' offices. This is unpredictable. If you had told me, asked me 2 days ago what was going to happen in court, I would never have predicted. And I have like very low levels of expectation for the Biden Justice Department and Hunter Biden, but I would never have predicted what happened in court the other day. So it's hard to see going forward. I think, Sean, the one thing we can be sure of is they're pretty committed to toughing this out. They haven't appointed a special counsel in 2.5 years. And again, the longer there's no indictment, another 30 days means the potential that more counts are lost. In October, for example, the statute of limitations runs on the gun charge. The 2016 tax year is if it's not already gone, it's gone. So they're just toughing it out, I think.
So as we see the Department of Justice and the FBI run cover for the Biden family, which it appears that's the case, I asked Wesley Hunt this earlier in the show, but you had the 1023 where an informant to the FBI talked about the Biden family crime syndicate where Joe Biden received $5 million from Burisma for some policy help. That comes out, and it was exposed to members of Congress on the Hill. The very next day, Donald Trump's charged with crimes down in Mar-a-Lago. And then the deal blows up yesterday or 2 days ago with Hunter Biden. And the following day, more charges come out against Donald Trump. Does this seem odd or is this just a coincidence that you have Donald Trump charges coming right after there's publicity around all the crimes allegedly committed by the Biden family?
Yeah, well, I'm like an Occam's razor guy. Like, you know, the simplest explanation is the explanation. And I think if you assume that the Biden Justice Department is hyper politicized, then all of these things make sense. If you take that out, none of it makes sense. So I'm going to go with the thing that makes sense and say this is a political outfit. So when some bad news for the Bidens comes out, they have to step on it by, you know, other kinds of news. It
is disappointing. Okay, so we have Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's business partner. He was very close to the Bidens. He's going to testify on Monday. What can we expect from his testimony? How does this impact the public perception, but also the cases potentially against the Bidens?
Well, I don't think the Biden investigation that the Justice Department is running is real. I think it's a sham. And if it was real, they wouldn't be letting Devon Archer testify in Congress. They've already had him testify, Sean, in the grand jury. Now, we don't have a special counsel, right? So I have to think the reason they put him in the grand jury was to see what he would say, not to advance the investigation. And whatever he's going to say to Jamie Comer's committee is going to be behind closed doors. So we'll have to hear, you know, we'll have to wait what we hear about it. But I would not be holding my breath for a big advance in the criminal investigation of, you know, the Justice Department's investigation of the Bidens, even with Devon Archer, because I don't think they're serious about it.
Well, it's interesting. The White House, after the news of Devon Archer's testimony to the Hill came out, they've switched their story. Joe Biden has said for years that he never talked to his son about his business dealings. That's been the status answer from the White House and from Joe Biden. Now they've come out and said, well, Joe Biden was never in business with his son, Hunter Biden. So it seems like Devon Archer's testimony to the Hill, the anticipation of that is making the White House change their tune in regard to what involvement Joe Biden had with his son, Hunter Biden.
Yeah, I think that's right. To me, the most astonishing thing about that is how brazenly they insult your intelligence, you know, because when she said the other day he's never been in business with him, she said, as I've said 1,000 times. And of course, she had never said that before. That was a complete sea change in their version of events. But they look you in the eye and just don't tell the truth.
They lie to your face. They think we're stupid. Andy McCarthy, you have been a dog on the bone in this case. We appreciate all of your great reporting and insight. And thanks for joining me on Kudlow.